What would you do if the man you dismissed as nobody turned out to be the one person who could teach you everything? That question haunted Rose Langford for the rest of her life. But on a Tuesday morning in March, she didn't know it yet. It was the kind of morning that starts cold and stays that way. Pale winter light pressing thin through the tall glass windows of St. Mary's Hospital. The coffee at the nurse's station already gone lukewarm. The waiting room filling up with the particular quiet of people sitting with things they can't fix. The kind of morning that feels ordinary right up until it doesn't. Rose had just come from a funding meeting on the 3rd floor. 45 minutes went exactly as planned, because things in Rose Langford's life generally went as planned. She was 36, strikingly composed, her dark hair pinned back without a single strand out of place. Her suit cost more than most people's monthly rent. She wore it the way some women wear armor, not for warmth, but for distance. She was walking toward the elevator when she heard it. "Please, save my daughter." She stopped. Not because the words were loud, they weren't. They came out broken and low, the kind of sound that doesn't echo, it just hangs in the air like smoke that won't clear. A man was on his knees at the reception desk, both knees pressed against the cold linoleum, his large calloused hands gripping the counter's edge like a man holding on at the edge of something very steep. His work shirt was clean, always clean, she'd notice later, but the collar was damp. He'd been crying for a while by then. Beside him, on a hospital gurney, lay a little girl, 6 years old, curly hair fanned across the pillow, her face the color of old candle wax, pale, still, too still. Tucked under her arm was a stuffed rabbit, gray, worn smooth, one ear slightly lopsided. A toy that had clearly survived 100 bedtimes and one very frightening ambulance ride. It had not left her side. She was barely breathing. "Camellia is only 6, the man said, his voice fracturing. "I'll work day and night, sell my truck, my house. Please, just don't let her go." The waiting room went the way waiting rooms go when grief gets too loud. The man near the vending machine studied his choices with sudden, intense focus. A woman in a puffy coat stared at her phone. Only a small boy, maybe 4, sitting beside his grandmother, watched with open, uncomplicated attention. He reached up and tugged her sleeve. She pulled him close without looking up. Rose frowned. She leaned toward her assistant, Dana, and said, not as quietly as she thought, "Another irresponsible single father who couldn't provide for his family." Dana hesitated, then, carefully, "Ma'am, that's the janitor from your floor. He cleans your office every night. Security told me he's been coming here straight from his shift for 10 days, sitting with her until morning, then going back to work." Rose went very still. 10 days. Every night after mopping her floors on the 27th floor, this man had been driving here and sitting in these chairs and trying to figure out how to save his daughter. And every morning he'd gone back. He had never been late, not once. She had never noticed him. The man looked up from the floor. His eyes found hers across 12 feet of linoleum and what felt like a much greater distance. Brown eyes, exhausted, steady. The eyes of someone who had learned to hold himself together through worse than this. Though right now, this was bad enough. He recognized her. She could see it happen, the slight stiffening, the faint shift in his jaw. His boss. The name on the building. The woman whose office he mopped every night at 10 p.m., whose coffee cup he always placed back in exactly the spot where she'd left it. For 3 years, she had walked past him without a word. Today, for the first time, she looked at him. And what she was about to do next would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. If you were Rose in that moment, would you have stopped or kept walking? Drop a yes or no in the comments right now and tell me why. Rose didn't go back to the elevator. She walked toward him instead. Her heels made that same crisp sound on the floor, the one that usually cleared a boardroom, but something in her expression had shifted. Not soft, not yet. Something harder to name than soft. Unsettled maybe, like a window slightly open in a room that had been sealed too long. "What's wrong with her?" she asked. Direct, no preamble. Ronan stood slowly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, The kind of man who takes up space without meaning to, but just then he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Because he hadn't. Severe congenital heart disease, he said. His voice was steady, the particular steadiness of someone who has said a terrible thing out loud so many times it has stopped feeling real. She needs surgery. The cost is $280,000. I've been trying to find a way for 10 days. Rose made her decision in approximately 4 seconds. I'll cover the full cost. A company medical assistance grant. Dana's pen stopped moving. Ronan shook his head. Rose blinked. Very few people said no to her. Excuse me? I appreciate it. Quiet. Firm. The way a door closes when someone means it. But I can't accept that. This isn't charity. It's corporate. I don't want my daughter growing up believing her father couldn't stand on his own. He said it without anger. Just the flat certainty of a decision made long ago. I'll find another way. Rose stared at him. She had built a company on the principle that every problem had a solution if you applied sufficient resources. This man was refusing her resources and doing it with a dignity that she, privately and against her will, found difficult to argue with. She told Dana she could leave for the evening. She canceled her standing Tuesday dinner reservation. She found a plastic chair in the pediatric ward, the molded orange kind, designed by someone who apparently had strong opinions against comfort, sat down in her $2,400 suit, and stayed. She was not entirely sure why. She told herself it was practical. The payment offer was still open if he changed his mind. That reasoning lasted about 20 minutes before she stopped pretending. The truth was simpler and harder to admit. The little girl with the lopsided rabbit had gotten under her skin. Around 9 that evening, Rose went downstairs to the cafeteria and made 2 bowls of oatmeal, brown sugar, raisins from a paper cup beside the coffee station, a pinch of cinnamon someone had left by the napkin dispenser like a small gift. Her adoptive father, Arthur, used to make it exactly this way on winter mornings before school, back when someone had remembered to make it for her at all. She carried both bowls back to the ward, set one beside Ronan's chair while he dozed upright, arms folded, breathing slow and controlled, the sleep of someone trained to rest in whatever chair was available. She didn't wake him. Instead, she sat beside Camelia's bed and watched the little girl sleep. One small hand rested open on the blanket, palm up. There was a neon green bandage on the back of her hand, little frogs printed on it, the kind the pediatric nurses kept specifically because children are easier to keep still when their bandages have frogs on them. Rose adjusted the blanket, carefully, the way you do with something fragile. Just past midnight, Camelia stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, dark and serious and curious all at once, even half asleep. She looked at Rose with the zero-filter honesty that only very small children have. "You're so pretty," she whispered, "like a princess, like in Daddy's stories." Rose smiled before she could stop herself, her first genuine smile in longer than she could track. Then Camelia said, with the quiet certainty of someone stating an obvious fact, "Do you want to be my mom?" The smile held, but something behind Rose's sternum pulled sharp and tight. She was 8 years old again, a hospital not so different from this one, cold sheets, fluorescent lights, the sound of her mother's footsteps moving toward the door, then the sound of the door, then nothing. She had lain there alone through the whole night, pressing her face into the pillow, waiting for footsteps that never came back. Certain, the way children are certain of things, that someone would return for her. No one had. She had stopped being certain of most things after that night. She had built an entire life out of making sure she would never need to be. "Get some rest, sweetheart," Rose said softly. She tucked the blanket a little higher. She did not answer the question, because she didn't know the answer. Because the question had landed somewhere she wasn't ready to look at yet. Camelia was already drifting off, the rabbit tucked under her chin, a faint expression on her face that looked, somehow, like satisfaction. Ronan woke around 2 in the morning. He found his bowl still on the chair, warm because Rose had wrapped a paper napkin around it. He sat for a moment, looking at it the way you look at something small and unexpected and quietly significant. He glanced at Rose. She was looking at the wall, Neither of them spoke. But they were both in the same room, in the same quiet, and that was something neither of them had shared with another person in a very long time. Outside in the hallway, a monitor began to beep. Then a second one, higher pitch, faster. A nurse's voice cut through the ward. "Doctor to room 412, now." Ronan was on his feet before the sentence finished. What was happening inside that room, and was there anything left that Ronan Harper could do to stop it? The hallway erupted. Nurses in blue scrubs moving fast. A cart rolling hard around the corner. Someone calling numbers in the flat, precise voice that medical professionals use when speed matters more than tone. Ronan walked, not ran, walked, to room 412, with a focus so complete it looked like stillness. A nurse stepped into his path. He said something low, barely audible, and then said it again with a quiet authority that had nothing to do with volume. The nurse stepped aside. He went in. Rose pressed both hands flat against the cold observation window and watched. What she saw made her breath stop. Ronan moved around Camelia's bed with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this before. Not in a hospital exactly, but somewhere that required the same precision, the same ability to convert fear into function. He checked the heart monitor, traced the lead wires with 2 fingers, knelt beside the access panel on the machine's side. Opened it, reached in. His expression didn't change. It stayed level, focused, the way a person looks when panic has been, through years of practice, rerouted into action. 30 seconds. The monitor steadied. The numbers climbed back into normal range. The room exhaled. A nurse near the door lowered her hands. The attending physician exchanged a look with his colleague. The silent kind that means, "Did you just see that?" And the colleague gave a single, tight nod. Through the glass, Rose watched Ronan gather Camelia against his chest. This broad, quiet man making himself small enough to hold a 6-year-old girl as if she were something he would simply not allow the world to take. His mouth moved close to her ear. A lullaby, low, wordless at first, then finding its melody. Something in a minor key that didn't feel sad, more like the sound of rain on a window when you're warm inside. Something that had been sung in this same voice many times before, in a house that had grown quieter than it used to be. It had been his wife's song. Rose didn't know that yet, but she felt the weight of it. Some griefs are recognizable even at a distance, the way you can smell a storm coming before the sky changes color. Her hands were pressed hard against the glass. She didn't remember pressing them there. She pulled out her phone. Professional habit, she told herself. A CEO's instinct to verify before trusting. She opened the Langford Tower Building Services app and pulled up the employee file. Ronan Harper, janitor, 27th floor, started 3 years ago. Emergency contact, none listed. She scrolled to prior employment. United States Army, Medical Corps. Further, awards, Combat Medical Badge, Meritorious Service Medal, and then the citation. 2018. Written in the careful, specific language of military commendation. Specialist Ronan Harper had maintained emergency field medical care under sustained enemy fire for 11 hours, successfully treating and evacuating 12 wounded soldiers. 3 of them would not have survived without his immediate intervention. 12 lives. Under fire. Over 11 hours. And then he had come home, lost his wife on a wet Tuesday in November, and taken a job mopping floors on the 27th floor of a building that bore the name of the woman who had just called him irresponsible. Rose set the phone down slowly. She stood in the hallway and reconsidered the word dignity. She had always understood it to mean presentation, the right suit, the right table, the right tone. She was revising that understanding in real time, standing in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning in a wrinkled blazer with her heels off. Through the glass, Camelia had calmed entirely. Her small hand was wrapped around 2 of Ronan's fingers, the way children hold on when they trust completely. Her breathing had slowed. The rabbit was tucked under her chin again, standing guard as always. Ronan was still whispering. Rose leaned forward without meaning to, the way you lean toward warmth when you've been in a cold room long enough to stop noticing you're cold. She caught only a fragment. "Daddy's here. We'll get through this together." Being kind, that's what keeps us strong. That last part, not being tough, not being brave, being kind, said as if it were the same essential category as oxygen. Not a nicety, not an extra, but the load-bearing thing. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. Decades of habit. She had learned at 8 years old that tears in a hospital hallway accomplished nothing. But this one came anyway, the way things come when they bypass the decision-making parts of you entirely and go straight to whatever was formed before you had words for any of it. Camellia reminded her of herself, not in any specific nameable way, but in the way that mattered. A sick child in a hospital bed, trusting completely in the one person who had stayed, who was still there, who had always been there, invisible and faithful, while the world walked past. Rose placed one hand against the glass, just for a moment. The glass was cool. On the other side, Ronan shifted, adjusting his hold on Camellia, tucking the blanket higher with one hand while keeping her close with the other. For one strange second, Rose had the sensation of being on the wrong side of something, not the window, something older. She let her hand fall. When Ronan came out 20 minutes later, he poured a cup of water from the pitcher in the hallway and drank it in slow, deliberate sips. His hands were completely steady. Rose watched them and thought about 11 hours under fire. He looked at her. She looked at him. "The monitor," she said. "How did you do that?" "I've worked with worse equipment in harder places." A pause. "Staying calm helps." "You were a medic." He didn't ask how she knew. He simply looked at her the way people do when a door they've kept shut gets opened. Not with anger, but with that careful, measuring look that asks, "What do you intend to do with what's behind it?" "A long time ago," he said. She wanted to ask about the 12 soldiers, about Elena, about the lullaby. She wanted to ask all of it, and she asked none of it, because some doors you have to earn the right to open, and she understood that better than most people. She went back to the orange plastic chair, kicked her heels off underneath it. Her suit was hopelessly wrinkled by now. She looked, if she was being honest, nothing like the woman who had walked out of that funding meeting 12 hours ago. She looked, if she was being honest, more like herself than she had in years. But the closer she looked at who Ronan Harper really was, the more she realized she had been asking entirely the wrong questions about her own life. By the third day, Rose had stopped pretending. She showed up with her own thermos, real coffee, not the cafeteria variety that tasted like a very tired Tuesday filtered through cardboard, and 2 blueberry muffins from the bakery on Clement Street. The one with the little chalkboard sign out front that always said something like, "Today's worry, none." Today's muffin, blueberry. She set one on the chair beside Ronan's jacket without explanation. He ate it without asking for one. It was, improbably, the most comfortable shared breakfast Rose had experienced in years. No agenda, no performance. Just 2 people and 2 muffins and a window with a sick little girl sleeping behind it. The previous evening, Rose had read his full file. Not the employee record this time, the deeper one. Military service documents. The citation again, which she had practically memorized by now. And a short interview from a veterans publication in 2019, where Ronan had described the 11-hour field operation in exactly 4 sentences, and then spent the remaining column inches talking about his wife, Elena. He described how she laughed, the full kind, the kind that committed completely, how she made soup that was, by any objective standard, not good, and served it with total confidence every single time. How she used to sing the Camellia before the baby was old enough to understand words, because she believed music gets into a person before language does. That's why people carry lullabies their whole lives, even after they've forgotten almost everything else. Elena had died 3 years ago. A wet road, a dark November evening, a collision Ronan hadn't been present for and could never undo. He had arrived at the hospital 4 hours after she was already gone. He had sat in a chair like these chairs, and held 14-month-old Camellia, who was too young to understand and old enough to feel that something permanent had changed. And he had made a decision in that chair that had shaped every morning since. I will be enough for her, whatever that requires. Rose closed her laptop. The villa was very quiet. She had always found the quiet useful, efficient for thinking, good for work. Tonight it felt different. Less like clarity, more like an empty room with all the furniture removed. She thought about her former husband, Marcus, confident in the easy way of people who have never once been left. He had ended the marriage 2 years ago, not in anger, but in that reasonable, detached way that was somehow worse, like identifying a design flaw in a product. "You're emotionally unavailable," he'd said. He wasn't wrong. She'd been building walls since she was 8 years old, and by 34 she'd become an expert architect. She sat with one question she couldn't put down. If I let myself stay, will I end up hurting this child the same way I was hurt? It followed her back to the hospital the next morning. On day 4, Ronan sat down beside her in the hallway while Camelia slept. They watched through the glass together. Down the corridor, a morning talk show played on a wall-mounted TV, the cheerful kind where everyone laughed with complete ease. Neither of them was watching it. "You look tired," Ronan said. "I'm all right. You've been here every day." Observation, not accusation. "So have you." A small, quiet pause. "It's different for me." Rose turned the coffee cup in her hands. "I've spent 15 years building a company that I said was dedicated to improving lives through medicine. I sit on 3 hospital boards. I give speeches about access to healthcare." She stopped. "This is the first time I've sat in a hospital waiting room." He didn't fill the silence. He let it stand, which was its own kind of answer. "Why did you stay?" he asked. "That first night." She opened her mouth, closed it, let the honest answer come up on its own. "I don't know," she said. I think she reminded me of someone." He waited. "I've been watching you for 6 months," she said, and the words surprised her even as she said them. "Every night when you cleaned my office, you put my coffee cup back in exactly the same position, the exact same angle. Every single time, for 3 years." She shook her head faintly. "I told myself it was just the job being done correctly." "It was the job," Ronan said. Then, quieter, "It was also a habit. My wife used to say I tidied other people's things the way some men tinker with engines. Couldn't help it." A brief pause, the kind that holds a name carefully. She said it was the most useful thing about me. Rose felt that sentence settle somewhere she hadn't expected. "When I was 8 years old," she said, "my mother brought me to a hospital. Her family couldn't afford the treatment I needed. She believed she was coming back for me." Her hands were still on the cup, but not quite steady. She didn't. Ronan turned toward her, not dramatically, just toward her, the way a person orients when they are genuinely listening rather than waiting for their turn. "I have spent my entire adult life making sure I would never be in that room again," Rose said. "Never be in the position of waiting for someone who doesn't come." She paused. "And now I'm afraid of something else entirely, that I'll be the one who doesn't come back, that I'll repeat what was done to me, even trying not to." "Nobody gets it right every time," Ronan said. His voice was low and even. "I have gotten it wrong more than I want to count. I've been too tired, too closed off, too inside my own grief to be what Camelia needed on any given day." He looked through the glass at his daughter, who was stirring, searching in her sleep for the rabbit. "But I kept showing up, not because I had it figured out, because she needed me to try." He was quiet for a moment. Trying is the only thing love actually leaves you. Rose closed her eyes briefly, opened them. "That may be the most useful thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. He almost smiled, almost. Then footsteps, fast and deliberate, at the end of the corridor. The doctor, clipboard in hand, wearing the careful expression of someone carrying time-sensitive information. "Mr. Harper." His voice measured, controlled. "The surgery window is 48 hours. After that, we cannot guarantee the same outcome." He paused, giving the number space to land. "The total cost is $280,000. 48 hours." Rose looked at Ronan. Ronan looked at Camellia through the glass. The little girl had found her rabbit without waking, pulled it to her chin by instinct, holding on the way she always did, as if she knew in her sleep exactly what was worth keeping. Would Ronan finally allow someone else to help carry the weight, or would his pride cost them both something they couldn't get back? Rose didn't wait for Ronan's answer. She walked to the nurse's station, picked up the billing authorization form, and signed her personal account number at the bottom with the same steady hand she used for acquisition agreements and board resolutions. The number she wrote from memory. She had always been good with numbers. Her adoptive father Arthur had noticed it first, the week after he'd found her in this kind of room, at 8 years old, reciting her patient ID. The nurse looked at the signature. "Ms. Langford, this is a personal account, not the company." "I know what it is," Rose said. Her phone rang before she reached the end of the hallway. Her CFO, then her head of PR, then 2 board members in a conference call that opened with the tone of people who had rehearsed their displeasure. "You're creating an optics problem, a liability." "I used my own money," Rose said, walking. "The linoleum was excellent for this. This is not a company matter." "Rose, you are the company. The board is welcome to put any concerns in writing." She stopped at Camelia's window. Inside, the little girl was awake, sitting up slightly, explaining something at length to her stuffed rabbit, using a very serious voice and a great deal of hand gesturing. "I am helping a child. That's the only fact that matters right now." She ended the call. Ronan was in the hallway. He'd heard enough. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know. It's going to cause you problems." "It already has." She said it without regret. She needed surgery. That's the beginning and end of it. He looked at her for a long moment, the same careful, measuring look from the window at 2 in the morning. Then he unfolded his arms. Quietly, the way a man lowers a guard he's been keeping for 3 years. The surgery was scheduled for 7 the following morning. It lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. Rose sat in the waiting room the entire time. The folder of contracts she'd brought stayed closed in her bag. Instead, she thought about Camelia's hand resting palm up on the blanket. The frog bandage. The rabbit that had ridden through the ambulance and triage and every room of this hospital without being separated from its girl for a single night. She thought about Ronan saying, "Trying is the only thing love actually leaves you." And she thought about Arthur, her adoptive father, who had shown up at her hospital room 3 days after her mother left. He'd just come back every day until it was. She hadn't thought about Arthur in years. She thought about him now, with something that felt like grief and gratitude braided together. And she let herself feel it. Sitting in the orange plastic chair, her shoes off, the contracts untouched, the way she never let herself feel things in rooms where people could see. The surgeon came out at 2:14 p.m. "She's stable. Surgery was successful. No complications." Rose closed her eyes, held them closed for a full 3 seconds. "Thank you," she said, just that. She meant it more than most things she had said in any boardroom. Ronan sat down in the chair beside her and put his face in his hands. Not crying, exactly, more like someone finally setting down a weight they had been carrying for so long that setting it down felt almost as hard as carrying it had. Rose sat beside him. She didn't move away. She didn't say anything. She had learned, somewhere in the last 4 days, that sometimes the most useful thing is just staying. The recovery arrangement was Rose's idea. Her villa had 2 guest suites, a garden with a patio that still had a price tag on the umbrella stand, and a kitchen she had used perhaps 17 times in 4 years. She proposed that Ronan and Camellia stay for post-surgical care. Ronan looked at her as if she'd suggested something unreasonable. "Not charity," she said. "The hospital recommends 4 weeks of supervised rest. Your building has 3 flights of stairs. I have a garden with exactly 0 stairs. 2 weeks. 3. 2.5. Fine." The first week was a little awkward, the way new arrangements always are. 2 people navigating a shared kitchen with the careful politeness of guests who aren't quite sure of the rules. Rose kept her schedule. Ronan kept to himself. They passed each other with the manly distance of strangers at a very quiet bed and breakfast, which was funny considering Rose owned it and the primary household authority was apparently a 6-year-old. Camellia had named the robotic vacuum cleaner Mr. Bumpy and was directing its daily operations from the couch with considerable confidence. By day 7, Camelia's cheeks were pink. She was eating oatmeal with brown sugar and requesting seconds and had opinions about the bird feeder outside the kitchen window, which she felt was underutilizing its potential. By day 7, Rose had started filling the bird feeder. She was sitting at the patio table on the morning of day 7, coffee, a cardinal at the feeder, the quiet kind she was beginning to find full rather than empty, when Camellia padded outside in her pajamas and settled into the chair across from her with the rabbit under one arm and a look of gentle authority on her face. She looked at Rose for a moment. "Mommy Rose," she said, simply, as if it had already been decided, as if it had been decided for quite a while, and she was simply letting the adults know. Rose went still. In the doorway behind them, Ronan, holding a dish towel, stopped. Camellia glanced between them with the serene patience of someone who had foreseen this outcome. "She's just like my mom used to be," she told her father, with calm conviction. "She's kind to people even when they didn't ask." Rose reached across the table. She drew Camellia into her arms, carefully, completely, and pressed her face into those small curls. And she cried, the real kind, the full kind she had been holding since she was 8 years old, waiting in a cold room for footsteps that never came back. Nobody left this garden, but would Ronan stay, or would the last wall between them finally cost them both everything they'd only just found? On the morning of day 10, Ronan came downstairs with a bag packed. Rose was at the kitchen counter, reheating coffee she'd already reheated twice. The cardinal was at the feeder outside. She'd started leaving seed out the night before, just in case. Small habit, forming itself without announcement. She looked at the bag, then at him. "I can't stay," he said. She kept her voice steady. "Camellia has 2 more weeks of recovery. We'll manage." "I know you will." She set the cup down. "That's not the point." She turned to face him. She wasn't wearing heels. She'd stopped wearing them in the villa around day 4. Somewhere between making oatmeal in the morning and sitting on the patio in the evening, the performance of it had simply fallen away. She was 3 inches shorter than him without them, and she looked up at him with none of the armor. No pressed lapel. No careful distance. "People will talk," Ronan said. "About why I'm here. About what it looks like. A woman like you taking in someone like me. I don't want Camellia growing up hearing, 'Ronan.'" She said his name the way she'd said it once before, like a door she'd decided to walk through. "You have spent 3 years protecting her from the world. I understand that. I respect it more than I know how to say." She paused. "But you taught me something I did not know before this week. Real kindness isn't the kind that writes a check and walks away. It's the kind that stays." Her voice caught slightly. She let it. "I have been walking away from things my entire life. I am not doing that anymore." He looked at her for a long moment. That careful, measuring look. "My father's name was Arthur," she said. "He wasn't rich. He wasn't impressive on paper. He came to my hospital room 3 days after I was left there, and he said, 'I heard you needed someone.' And then he came back the next day. And the next. He didn't promise me anything except that." She held Ronan's gaze. "I want to be that for her. I want to be that for both of you. Not because I have money, because I finally understand what it actually means to show up." The bag stayed on the floor. Ronan reached out and took her hand. The calloused one. The one that had fixed the monitor with a pen cap and held a daughter through the night and placed a coffee cup back in exactly the right spot for 3 years without ever being thanked for it. His grip was gentle, certain, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Neither of them spoke. Some moments don't need filling. Some things are just the long exhale after the storm passes, when the quiet turns from empty to full. Camellia appeared in the kitchen doorway, pajamas, rabbit, Mr. Bumpy at her heels. completing what appeared to be his morning survey of the ground floor. She looked at their joined hands. "Good," she said, with complete satisfaction. And then she went to pour herself some orange juice, because the important work was done. 2 weeks later, Rose stood at the front of a conference room. Not a formal press event, no media wall, no podium lighting. Just her staff, a few journalists from the medical technology beat, and the kind of quiet that comes when a room isn't sure what it's about to hear. She spoke without notes. "I have spent 15 years building a company on the belief that innovation saves lives. I still believe that. But this year, I learned something I should have understood much earlier." She looked at the table, then back up. "The most important person I've ever met was not in a boardroom or a research lab. He worked nights on the 27th floor of this building, and his name is Ronan Harper. Because of him, and because of a 6-year-old girl named Camellia, who told me I looked like a princess and then asked if I wanted to be her mom, I have healed something I carried since I was 8 years old." The room was very still. "Kindness is not a soft word," Rose said. "It is not a minor virtue. It is the thing that holds people together when everything else has given way. I watched a man practice it quietly, invisibly, every night for years, and I called him nobody." She paused. "I want this company, and everyone in this room, to understand what it actually costs to look past someone, and what it's worth to look again." She announced the Camellia Harper Pediatric Cardiac Fund that morning, established with her own capital. No corporate strings, just a name and a reason and a direction. A reporter in the back asked whether this was a personal statement or a company one. "Both," Rose said. 3 days after that, Ronan walked back into Langford Tower. He was wearing a navy suit, well-fitted, a gift he'd resisted for approximately 48 hours before quietly acknowledging it was a genuinely good suit. Gerald, 11 years on the night shift and a man who had seen most things, gave a slow nod from across the lobby that communicated deep and wordless approval. The young man at the front desk looked twice. Someone's thermos got set down harder than intended. Rose was waiting at the elevator. Camellia was between them, mid-story about a dream involving Mr. Bumpy, a dragon with an inexplicable fear of area rugs, and a resolution that apparently required significant input from the stuffed rabbit. The story needed both of their hands, which she considered a completely reasonable requirement. They let her hold them. The elevator doors opened. The three of them stepped in together. The lobby went back to being a lobby. Somewhere on the 27th floor, a coffee cup was sitting in exactly the right spot, waiting. This story reminds us of one quiet truth most of us already know but forget to practice. Kindness is not a feeling. It is a decision you make with your hands and your feet, not just your heart. Arthur didn't rescue Rose with money. He came back to her hospital room on a Tuesday and then again on a Wednesday and then again. That was all. That was everything. If you are reading this and your house has gotten very quiet, pick one person this week. Not a phone call. Show up. Bring the coffee cake from the church potluck recipe, the one with the brown sugar crumble on top that everybody asks about. Sit at their kitchen table for 45 minutes and ask one question. How are you really doing? Then listen without fixing. That is what Ronan did. That is what Arthur did. That is what any of us can do today, before the week gets away from us. The smallest act of staying is still staying. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It doesn't aim to change the whole world, just one small corner of your heart. To help you believe that amid all the hardship, there is still room for kindness, for unconditional goodness, and for the most beautiful things quietly existing, waiting for us to notice them.